Welcome to Wisdom Tips, another episode, and I am so excited. Episode 4. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Dr. Connie Green. Thank you for joining us on Wisdom Tips. I'm here to drop pearls of true wisdom, giving you the tools you need to live a victorious life. Come on, let's give God some praise tonight. Amen. The topic of tonight is childhood trauma, the hidden killer. Now I can just stop right there. Let me say that again. Childhood trauma, the hidden killer. Did you not know that childhood trauma can kill us? Some of us don't even know we have childhood trauma. Often we discuss childhood trauma as an adult, and we talk about what happened to us and the reason you are the way that you are, and you look at it at an adult perspective. Have you ever thought about, rarely we think about childhood trauma um, on a child's perspective? Do we ever ask a child, do you have childhood trauma? No, we don't ask a child that. We just assume kids will bounce back and they'll be okay. But tonight we're going to talk about childhood trauma on the childhood's perspective. The trauma of children is so near to my heart, because number one, I experienced childhood trauma when I grew up. Oh, yes. And because of that, I devoted 45 years of my life helping young people and children through trauma. We had a daycare center for over 25 years, and I've seen all kinds coming in and out of the facility. And many times we would get the children that nobody else wanted because they had behavior problems. And the parents would come to us as a last resort because they were put out of school. Some of them were put out of daycare centers and everything else. And so they would send them to us. So we were able to really pour into these young kids and understand that these young kids wasn't actually bad, and they didn't have really a bad, what they call it, behavior problems. It was just that they had childhood trauma, and nobody never stopped to think about that. Did you know that more than 2/3 of children reported at least one traumatic experience before they get 16 years old? Potentially, childhood trauma events includes so many things. I'm just going to read just a few of them. You will be really, really surprised. Psychologically and physical, and even child violence, community school violence. I mean, we hear that on the news all the time. Bullies, they have bullied kids. Some kids have even killed themselves because they've been bullied. And then sometimes children witness terrible experiences, especially if they grow up in a domestic violent home. They witness their father punching their mother. They witness their hollering, and screaming, they're crying, the throwing tables and cursing and all kind of different things. Believe it or not, the kids that grow up in those type of environments, it can really hurt them and harm them in so many ways. And then you think about the natural disasters, and even like now when we look at Ukraine, a lot of those kids in there, they're underground, they're running for their lives, that they're hearing the bombing going on, they're seeing people get killed. Just imagine how those kids are going to feel as they grow up, because they're going through this now at a very young age, and it's really going to affect them. And hopefully those kids can get some help. And then we have kids even here in America. We've had natural disasters. We've had fires, so people's houses have burnt down, hurricanes, storms, all kind of things that happen, when we least expect it. And then when we think about the pandemic that we had just a few years ago, my goodness, children are definitely facing childhood trauma. And sometimes people feel like because kids are playing and they're happy-go-lucky and they're playing with their dolls, they're going outside and they're riding their bikes, and sometimes we think it's not affecting them. But it's so many ways that you can understand the effects of childhood trauma if you just stop, slow down, and ask them some questions, and you'll be really, really surprised. Also, when they look at commercials and stuff, it's like sexual exploitation that you see on TV, looking at adult movies that they shouldn't be looking at when mom and dad is doing something else, or maybe mom and dad is sleeping there on TV watching all these type of things. Then all kind of things grow up inside of their spirit. They don't know how to process that. That can be a really great effect on a child at a very early age. Then also sudden or violent loss of a loved one. if a child's mother died, if their father died, grandmother died, somebody that's close to them, a lot of times people don't talk to the kids about it unless it's somebody really close, like their mom or dad. But what if they lost pawpaw, somebody they really, really loved, or a favorite uncle, or even their best friend? I remember when my child was growing up, it was a young guy. I think he was like in third grade at the time. No, he was in the fourth grade. He actually killed himself. And I had to take my son to the funeral. And it really did affect him. I found out later on, weeks later, he started having sudden behavior problems and rage. And I had to sit down and talk to him. And I found out he said he had lost his friend. And he was very upset about it. And so we have to really watch and watch what they're going through when they go to school, and if their behaviors are going the other direction and not the norm, and he's acting different in some kind of way, or she's acting different in some kind of way. It's usually some kind of trauma that we need to stop and take a look at. Another one, military families. It's related to children that have military families. Why? Because mom or dad has went off the war. Sometimes they've left with grandmommy, auntie, or whatever, and they go through trauma because maybe somebody in the home that's taking care of them that wasn't their parents. Perhaps maybe they have abused them or done something to them, and maybe they're afraid of that daddy or mom's going to die in war. So they're facing those type of situations as well. When parents are deployed, and especially when they come home and they've been injured, or they get a notice that their parents have died, then they're definitely having a problem with dealing with that childhood trauma, something that they'll never forget about when they get older. But they always say kids will bounce back. Yeah, they may bounce back, but once they see it, once they hear it, it's in their brain, and they'll never forget it, even though it's covered up. And they grow up, and sometimes we can grow up as young kids, and you go through your teenage years and you feel like things doesn't bother you or anything. And then you may be 40, 50 years old. All of a sudden, this childhood trauma comes out, and you wonder, why in the world is it coming out now? I'm 50 years old. What is happening? Why am I having all these dreams? It's because you suppressed it. A child is very good at suppressing what they're feeling. And then, of course, most of all, neglect. I've seen a lot of that in the daycare center, where we would pick up kids from school, and the diapers were sore, hadn't taken a bath, baby bottles had roaches in them, all kind of things that we had experienced when we dealt with those type of kids, because we had our school in an urban area where it was a lot of poor people and a lot of single parent homes. And so we seen a lot of neglects, but we was the safe haven, as I would call it, at our school, where we would make sure they had the food that they needed when they first came in. We didn't just give them crackers or juice for breakfast. We had full breakfasts that we gave, because we knew those kids, someone wouldn't get a good meal. So we had the grits, the eggs, the bacon, the toast, the fruit, and stuff like that every morning. Of course, we had a great lunch as well, because a lot of those kids did not get the food that they need. And then you think about the kids that are threatening illnesses like cancer and all kind of even diabetes at an early age. So of course, yes, kids do go through trauma, and that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about it on the perspective of children, and I think you're going to really enjoy this. And I would love for you to tell your friends and tell somebody to tune in right now to this broadcast, my YouTube channel, and I would love for you to just touch the button. So when we come on, this is like a notification button that you can touch, and it will let you know when we're coming on. So if you would do that for me, I really believe somebody needs to hear this. Somebody has a child at home right now that's having some behavior problems, and they just call them bad. That's what they call us when we grew up. You just bad. You need to stop that. But sometimes, why is the kid acting out? Why is the kid upset? Why is the kid, having trouble at school? Just slow down enough to talk to your child and see what that's going on. Let's look at what some of the other traumatic events can be. The traumatic events can be very frightening and dangerous, and even violent. It can pose many threats on young people. It could be bodily harm. They can witness something traumatic. They can have a life altering problems in their health. And they can have problems with not having the right security to protect them, because mama has to go to work, and the baby's left with a babysitter, and the babysitter got your children in the house, and you don't know what's going on. But you have to work, so you have to do what you got to do. And so, we have to be aware of the environment that you put your kids in, make sure that those that are taking care of your kids are people that you love and trust, or people that you've had references from, and and then you would know without a shadow of doubt, hopefully, that your child is in a safe place. But unfortunately, people that are single, don't have a lot of money, sometimes they can't afford child care. So we've seen a lot of abuse in families that have single parent homes that make a minimum wage at work and really don't have the income that they need to put them in a proper facility where they can be safe. So I am so excited that you tune in again. And right now, I'm just so excited. I just can't hardly stand it. I'm excited tonight about this episode because I got a great, great guest that's coming on tonight. Very special guest to me. And you're going to find out who he is tonight. He's a nationally acclaimed speaker. He's an author of a book called The Journey Living Day by Day. And you want to get that book. It's a devotion. It's absolutely amazing. It will be very encouraging to you. So who is it? It's my oldest son, Roger Green Jr. Hello, Roger.
Hey, Dr.
How
Connie
you doing?
Green. I'm doing
I'm
amazing.
so thankful to see you tonight. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me
The
on
idea
Wisdom
of this
Tips.
episode, you remember the idea of this episode where it came back, right, son? Remember we talked about it. We had a conversation
Yes,
that we had many, many years ago. It really wasn't many years ago. It was maybe 2 or 3 years ago that my son shared with me about a trauma that he experienced when he was a little boy. And I didn't have a clue that he had went through that situation. And it just totally devastated me. And then I immediately realized that there is often sometimes in life of young people, they will suppress things, suppress feelings, and sometimes they don't know how to talk to mom and talk to dad about it, so they don't say anything. They just bury it inside. And so we want to talk about that tonight. And at this time, I'm gonna ask my son if he would like to discuss exactly what he talked to me about in his own way, so we can get a perspective of a child's perspective, how he felt. So, Roger, if this time, if you would talk to us about how you feel about the event and what kind of profound impact it had on your life.
absolutely. I want to, first of all, thank you, Mom, for having me on Wisdom Tips with Dr. Connie Green. I feel like I finally arrived to be on such a program like this. And so I'm so excited to be here. Those of you that are here, I appreciate the support that you give my mom. Definitely, as she mentioned, please share this. This may be a blessing to someone. But as my mom mentioned, we were really sitting down, talking, having a heart to heart, my mom and my dad. And, being a man now over 40 with kids of my own, it was one of those things that we talked about, the scary nature for me now realizing that I'm in the driver's seat, now that I have a 17-year-old daughter, now that I have a 14-year-old son,
Mhm.
realizing some of the things that I suppressed as a child that my parents had no clue that I went through, now having to live that through the vein of a parent, realizing that, wow, maybe my kids are suppressing some things that they haven't told me. And it really opened up the door of conversation for us to really discuss things that I've been through, but also for me to have a different vantage point of being able to understand my kids, being able to really give probing questions, trying to find out things that my kids have went through. Because what I found out is often we as parents do the best that we can to protect our kids, but we can't be there 24/7. And so there are times where our children may be left vulnerable, uh, not any negligence of our own, but because it's just reality. We have jobs, we have other responsibilities, we have things that come up. And so we can't have a watchful eye on them 24/7. And so all we can do is pray for mercy. And so I begin to pray about ways to just help and interact and even share with my kids. And so it's an honor to be here on Wisdom Tips to talk with Dr. Connie Green and give me the opportunity to share with this. And I was sharing with my parents that at a very young age, I think my earliest recollection was probably somewhere around 4 or 5 years old, having my very first sexual encounter with someone who would have been a trusted person of the family. And it was at that very young age, this particular person wanted me to kiss them and touch them in certain areas and doing certain things. And of course, at that age, I didn't understand how profound that was. I didn't even understand what I was doing. And it progressed over a period of time. It was like every time I was in that person's presence, they would want me to do those particular things. And so as I grew, my knowledge of it was still very, I would say, very childlike. I just thought it was what you were supposed to do. I thought it was just something you did out of obedience. It seemed to be something that gave that person gratification. And so it seemed like, I was being a good boy. I was, come sit on my lap and do this. You're being a good boy. And so they abused somewhat the trust that I had in them. And it wasn't until I grew older that encounters like that continued to happen with older females that would come into our family circle or in circles of trust. And they would do that. And the reason why I think it's so profound to me now is it's mind blowing that it took me 40 years to really process it to the point to even share it with my parents. And it wasn't that my parents and I don't have a good relationship. We've talked about everything under the sun. I grew up in a very, very candid family. Those of you that have been tuning into Dr. Green, you know that she's very candid. She's raw. You can talk about everything. It's a very safe space. And so it is with my father as well, who has been pastoring for over 25 years. There's nothing that they haven't seen, nothing that they haven't heard. So it wasn't that I couldn't share it. It's just, I don't think it ever dawned on me to share it. And so the effect that it had on me is those experiences at a very, very young age grew to teenage years with older women. And so what it developed was an appetite of sexual promiscuity. And I found myself not being able to get out of this habit of things. And I begin to ask myself a question that most people ask themselves when they're in similar dilemmas, when they're struggling in a certain area, when they can't figure out why they keep repeating certain behaviors. The biggest question that I ask myself is, what's wrong with me? And so I want to talk to someone out there tonight. That's not the most productive question that you should be asking. The most productive question is not asking what's wrong with me, but the most productive question for you to ask as it relates to childhood trauma is, what happened to me? That's the most important question, because if you can trace what happened to you, you can trace why you're doing certain things. And I often say that we typically deal with the symptoms of a sickness without dealing with the actual root causes of the sickness. And so the acting out, the rage, the anger, the disappointment, the guilt, the promiscuity, all of those things were the symptoms of what had happened to me. And it really wasn't dealing with the actual sickness of it. And so I don't know who this is for tonight, but I just wanted to share this because I really believe that there's a profound responsibility on me right now as a man, a grown man, to speak up and speak and tell those stories, because we often hear about children being violated and abused from a female's perspective. Growing up, going to college and high school, even as a grown man, I can count on one hand the number of close friends and confidants that I've had that have not been violated in a certain way from a female's perspective. And when I think about that, I said, wow, it's profound that females are affected in that way, but there are equally as many males that go through this. And often we don't talk about it, we suppress it. And what happened to me is I grew up thinking that it's normal. I grew up thinking that it was macho. I grew up thinking that, it wasn't abuse. It's just I got game, that I have these older women wanting me. And I didn't realize that they were preying on my vulnerability. I didn't realize they were preying on the trust that was entrusted to them by my parents and people that had entrusted into them. And I didn't realize that I was actually a victim in those circumstances. And so for those of you that are going through that right now, I'm speaking up so that men out there can feel comfortable enough to deal with this childhood trauma and not repeat some of the behaviors that really snared me for a great deal of my life.
Thank you so much, Roger. It's very difficult for me to even hear that, being a mother. We're talking about the impact of trauma tonight on a child's perspective. And my older son shared with me a few years ago, people that we trusted, babysitters, a few of them were, violated his trust. And he never shared that with me until just a few years ago. And I used to wonder why some of the behaviors that I seen in my son, far as being angry and going into rages when I would ask him questions, where he was, what was he doing. And I couldn't understand, because he was a very nice natured person that loves everybody. And when he would holler or yell, it wasn't his character. And I couldn't understand it. And then he would run out of the house and we would have to go find him. And he would never tell us what happened to him. And then when he shared this with me just a few short years ago, it devastated me and my husband. So the impact of trauma from a parent's perspective, I'm going to talk about first. How did I feel? Like I said, devastated. I cried. I felt guilty, number one, because I thought I was putting him in a safe place. And these were people that were supposed to be believers, somebody I trust and loved. And so first was the guilt. I cried a couple of days. I had to pray, ask God to help me, because some of those people are still alive. Should I approach them? Should I say something to them? The Lord said, let it go. But I was thankful that my son was able to share this with me, to get it out in the open. And we as a family, we cried together, we held each other, we prayed together. And I've seen a great change in him now than ever before. The Lord is blessing him in so many areas of his life. He's always loved people, and he's doing the jobs that God has called him and commanded him to do. He seems more happier, and he seems more vibrant, and he seems more of himself, except he's working too much. He won't stop working, but he's always been that way, where he loves to work. He's got his hands so many different places. He's got so many different talents and gifts. He's not, he tries to be modest. He didn't want me to say too much about his bio, but he's a national acclaimed speaker. He's been all over the country. He has books. He does other things. He's a musician. He's a youth pastor. He's a counselor. He's a life coach, and he's me and his dad's right arm, because he helps the ministry in so many different ways. And so we really wanted to share this on wisdom tips, and it was very, we had to really pray about it, because I wanted to make sure this is something he wanted to do. And I thank God he was able to open up to share, because I feel like this is going to help somebody else. Okay, what happened to my son? It happened. It's over with. He's fine. He was fine, going on in his life, even as a youth, but he wasn't fine when it came to his mental and psychological well-being that was damaged. And then the things that he went through and didn't know why he went through, it all came back to what happened to him when he was young. And so other things that I want to share with you all before we go to a break is the impact of a childhood trauma can be very stressful, and it can last well beyond childhood. So we've seen that tonight. It can what last beyond childhood. My son is 40-some years old, and he just got it out in his 40s, what was going on with him and how he felt. And it was like a release that he was able to get out of his heart and out of his mind and get some help. Also, children that have childhood trauma can have learning problems where they can't learn well in school. They have lower grades. People have to always suspend them for something that they're doing. A lot of times when you see kids like that, they're doing that because they don't really know the word. Maybe they can't read as well, or maybe they're not as smart, because the childhood trauma that they went through is causing the brain to react another way, where they can't concentrate. Not that they're dumb or stupid or anything, but if you pull them away from the environment and you get them tutors and you train them, you'd be really surprised how intelligent some of these children are. Also, it can increase their health and their mental well-being. It can even make them sick. I used to have kids in my daycare kept colds, and runny nose and high fevers and ear aches and pains. And the mama would take them back and forth to the doctor, and they couldn't find out what was wrong with them until we had meetings with the parents, and they would tell us what was going on in the home. And once the child was moved from that situation, or once the behavior stopped in the home, the child was able to be healed. And so that's another impact. The other impact is the increased involvement in a child's life. Like if a parent is on welfare, or if he's in the judicial system, because he's been in trouble a lot, that can cause him to do even greater things when he gets out to be an adult, that will cause him even to end up in prison. You start out as a young teen robbing somebody of their pocketbook and running, and then you start off maybe breaking in somebody's house, and then the next thing you know, you're killing somebody if they never stop the process. So when you look at a lot of these people that are on the streets and carrying guns and killing up folks and doing all kind of stuff, like Roger said, it's not why did they do that, it's what happened to them. I mean, Oprah Winfrey wrote a wonderful book dealing on that subject. A lot of times we look at people and we point our fingers and say, what's wrong with her? Why is she dressed like that? Why is she doing that? Going with all these men, she ain't nothing but a skank hoe. Yeah, we do that. But if you ever wonder what happened to her, what happened to her? Why is she that way? You ever looked at a man and asked him, what's happening to him? Why is he running around and doing this, that, and the other, and got 50, 11 different girlfriends? What happened to him? So we need to start looking at what people's behaviors are on the aspect of something that, on the aspect of what happened to them maybe when they were a child, or what happened to them in life. And stop being so critical, and try to help people and try to understand people. And if you stop and you talk to them, you may be surprised. They may tell you. Sometimes people hold stuff for a long time, and they just waiting on somebody to ask them what's going on. And if they have someone they can trust and love, and they can share it, a lot of times it gives them the release, and it's like a weight taken off their back and off their shoulder, and they feel like they can go on with their life. All right. So I'm excited about this topic. I hope you are. I hope you can share it tonight. Share it with someone. Call somebody. Let them know that the broadcast is on. We're talking about the impact of trauma, and we're talking about how trauma can be a killer. If you hold it inside and you don't get it out, things can get a lot worse. So I'm getting ready to go on break right now, and so I want you to come back right after the break so we can continue to talk about this subject, very needed subject, overcoming childhood trauma. Stay with me now and come back to Wisdom Tips, and we'll continue to talk on this subject. God bless you.
My heart broke for her. She looked so afraid. I wanted to take her pain away.
All the kids involved were so overwhelmed. We just tried to make them feel safe.
I felt helpless, like there was so much more I should be doing to make things better for him, but I couldn't find the right words.
I struggled with my own fear and trauma after the hurricane. But I needed to find a way to help my kids deal with their feelings too.
These are the voices of adults who are close to children in the immediate aftermath of a traumatic event. They might be parents, family members, teachers, clergy, first responders, medical personnel, humanitarian workers, or concerned volunteers. During those critical first hours and days after a trauma, adult presence and support is especially important for children. Any adult can make a difference for a child who has suffered a traumatic experience, regardless of the type of event. Keep a few important tips in mind. Provide safety. This is the most important tip of all. The feeling of safety after trauma is paramount, especially for children. Trauma survivors often describe feeling fear and vulnerability. Any small gesture of safety goes a long way. Talk with the child. Help the child understand, if possible, what happened in the event stick with the facts. There is no need to ask a child to discuss his or her own experience, but be available and ready if it is helpful. This allows him or her to make sense of emotional reactions such as fear or grief. Hold the child. If appropriate, human touch can be very beneficial for children who are afraid and feeling vulnerable. In the aftermath of a frightening experience, touch from a trusted adult or someone trying to help can be a big part of making a child feel secure. Never force this, as it can be unwanted, but making yourself available is an act of protection, safety, and comfort. Relax the rules, but maintain structure. It is okay to allow for some changes to rigid rules in an attempt to show the child you understand the magnitude of what happened. However, children respond well to a schedule and regimen that they can count on to remain the same, especially when things around them seem to be changing or uncertain. For example, young people can be excused from school immediately following an event. Soon after, however, they may find comfort in the structure offered by school, even if classes are modified in order to discuss what happened. Help others. Giving your time and energy to others who may have also experienced the trauma is helpful for everyone involved. It helps those who need you, empowers you to feel like you are actively making a difference, and provides a good role model of service and giving for children who might be looking for an example to follow. People who share a traumatic experience can also experience the strength and hope of healing with others. Trauma is difficult for everyone. There is no single right response after a traumatic event. Recovery is a process and requires understanding from others and time for healing. However, everyone needs to feel safe and cared for, especially children. Knowledge of a few important tips can arm you with strength that you can share with children who might be especially frightened and vulnerable in the immediate aftermath of trauma. It allows you to help, and with that help comes hope.
Welcome back to Wisdom Tips with Dr. Connie Green. I hope you enjoyed that clip. Has some very good information that can help our little kids and our children that went through childhood trauma. And I hope you take something with that. And please share this. Share this with a friend. Let people know. And please like and share this broadcast. And also, we would love for you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, if you will. And that would be a great help for us, so we can get more people coming in, tuning in to hear what we have to say. And if you're joining me for the very first time, we are talking about childhood trauma, the hidden killer tonight. So please let somebody know, yes, it's hidden because people don't talk about it. People hold it in. And that's why sometimes people are so mean and angry, and they bless everybody else, cuss everybody out, and don't have no love in their heart, and just angry and bitter. And you wonder what in the world wrong with them. Maybe they're going through some childhood trauma and they don't even realize they've held it in so long that they just don't, they mad at everybody. They don't trust nobody. Do you know anybody like that? I do. I know some people like that. But guess what? If you stop and sit down sometime and talk to them and show them how much you love them and care, and try to befriend them, sometimes they'll warm up to you and they'll let you know what's going on in their lives, and you maybe perhaps can help them. So, I'm excited about this topic. We're going to go ahead and continue this topic. And I want you to make sure you get some notes and stuff if you're tuning in, so you can go back and you can help, because I got some tips I'm going to give you before we close out. But, I was talking to my son, those of you that just tuning in, and he had a traumatic experience that happened to him when he was young. People that we loved and trust, and they really victimized my child. And I'm still asking God to help me right now, because I just found out a few years ago not to go to some of them people. I'm just going to be frank. I'm a mama bear. So it's taking all the Holy Ghost I got to hold me back. And so y'all pray for me real good. Pray for Dr. Green, because, it ain't right. And it's not right with anybody that's been through anything and have had childhood trauma, no matter what the situation is. But one thing I do know, God is a healer, and God has healed me and my family through this situation. And that's why we're talking to you tonight. You know, things are going to happen in life, but we're going to bounce back from a setback, and we can help others. And what I see out of this situation about what happened to my son, we telling other people about it so they can get some healing. They don't have to be ashamed on a man's perspective. Like my son just said, Roger Green Jr. just said, my son, he said, a lot of men don't talk about it. You know, women talk about it all the time. We think it's only women has been victimized, been molested or raped or whatever. But there's a lot of men out there that's hurting, that's crying and upset and frustrated and mad and angry. And you just think they're crazy. But they got something going on that they're holding in because it's hidden. They're afraid to come out. And hopefully during this broadcast, hearing my son come out with what happened to him, maybe other males can come out and talk about what has happened to them and not be ashamed about it. They were kids. They were children. Come on. It's nothing to be ashamed about. This is something that happened to him. And so he wanted to share it so other people can know and have the freedom to do the same, males especially. And so tonight, I want to share with you all also that how good God is through all this situation that we're going through. Through the situation that me and my family went through. I just thinking about how he just really healed us. After knowing this situation, it could have went another way really quick. But just praying and seeking God's face and helping other people has really helped us bounce back. So if you've been experiencing some of this type of stuff, if you do stuff for other people, a lot of times what you're going through will either dissipate or you're beginning to get healed. The more you help others and talk about other people's situations, try to help them or pull them out, then God can begin to bless you. So before I give you the wisdom tips of the day, I would like to again to recognize my very special guest, my son, Roger Green Jr. Roger, we often say that childhood trauma is a silent killer.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what that means to you?
Well, I think it's a profound thing. I think what you said, even through the healing process that we're going through, it's given us the opportunity to talk about it. One thing that my father always has taught me my entire life is you're not healed until you can talk about it. And so for those of us that have been hurt profoundly, I mean, to the core, often you don't like talking about it. You don't like to confront it. You don't like to deal with it. And so my dad would oftentimes tell me, you know, it's never going to go away. So in your own time, you have to work through it. You have to find a way to deal with it, to confront it, to talk about it. And so now, even being able to talk about it, you know, there's no guilt, there's no shame, there's, you know, none of those things. I can talk about it with a smile on my face. You know, somebody might be looking at the live today and saying, you know, is he crazy? You know, what's wrong with him? He's smiling and we're talking about trauma. And it's because I've experienced healing. And so when I talk to people about it being a hidden killer, it's one of those things that is gradually, incrementally, day by day, eating away at you, and you don't realize the effects that it's having on you. There's a book that I love to read called The Compound Effect. It talks about great and big things that happen in your life, typically don't happen all at once, but there are those incremental small things that happen over time, those habits, those cycles that compound upon themselves, and then you look up and it's compounded and it's something great. It could be positive or negative. And so for those of you that are out there, I want to talk about this hidden killer, this secret silence that's keeping you bound. And for every man out there, I want to tell you, I want to give you the courage to be able to speak up and begin to deal with those things. Because I, just like you, was, you know, a man's man, full of testosterone, grew up under the notion that it is a dog eat dog world. Only the strong survive. You can't even show a bit or ounce of weakness, because if you do, they're going to chew you up and spit you out. I grew up in an environment of killers and gangbangers and drug dealers and all kind of people. I mean, some of the hardenest men you ever want to know. So it gave me this rugged exterior, feeling as though, you know, there could be no vulnerability. There was no such thing when I grew up as emotional intelligence, you know, the things that we talk about now, you know, toxic masculinity, that didn't exist. You know, you better not come in the neighborhood talking about toxic masculinity when I was growing up. And so I understand the struggle for those that are reluctant to deal with that. But I promise you, the weight that has been lifted, the ability for me to talk to other men about some of the struggles that they deal with. I don't know what wives I need to talk to tonight, that have a husband that you just can't reach. I want to tell you to just embrace, give that comfort, give that love, give that understanding, because men often we internalize things to the point that we're just a power keg that we explode. And so it is a hidden killer because it is latent. It's pressure that we don't see. It is trauma that we don't see. It is abuse that we don't see. It is different things that have happened to that man that weighs him down. And this is not just for men, but I can only speak on the perspective of a man. I know women deal with it, and probably the majority of our audience tonight may even be women. But I would suggest to you, if you have a man in your life, whether it is your husband or your cousin or your brother or your father, let them see this episode, because I promise it may help them. It may shed some light on some things that they're going through. It may even open the door for them to share in a way that you never thought that they shared before. I can tell you, when I brought this to my parents' attention, it just came up in conversation. It wasn't necessarily a planned heart to heart. It wasn't a planned meeting. Let's sit down and talk about it. We were sitting and we were discussing some things, and we were talking about some hard things, and it just came out. And we literally sat there. I felt like a baby. I sat there and cried like a baby. 40-year-old man crying like a baby in my parents' arms. But it was what I needed. And even saying that, what happens, there are things that are called ACEs. They're adverse childhood experiences. That's what psychologists call it, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And what happens sometimes with those adverse childhood experiences, you become arrested in development. And so you literally are stuck in that developmental stage of the place and the time wherewith that trauma happened. And so at that point, when I broke down crying like a baby in my parents' arms, I was literally like I was arrested in development at the age of 4 or 5 years old when this stuff began. And it's like I begin to feel the emotion and the trauma of it right there, as though I had been taken from 40 to 5 years old. And so I don't know who I'm talking to tonight. I don't know who needs to hear this, but today is a day that you can get free of those things. Today is a day that, through these wisdom tips that Dr. Green is going to share here momentarily, you take those things to heart. You practice them and implement them even with your children. And it's just my prayer that God will bring healing. You know, as a father, as a youth pastor who deals with kids, as one that has a degree in early childhood development, schooling, education in that, my heart really goes out to children. And so we really wanted to tackle this issue of childhood trauma tonight. And I pray that it blesses somebody.
God bless you, son. And I'm sure it has blessed a lot of people tonight. I'm telling you. And I thank God that you were brave enough to come out with this. You're a very private person. So I know God was in control and allowed you to do this and spoke to your heart, because I know a lot of people are going to be blessed, especially men, by your testimony. And I just think so I'm so glad that God has totally, truly delivered you from the pain that you was experiencing. It was like a breakthrough, and you were able to breathe, and because you got it out, and you said you felt 100% better, that you were able to talk to somebody. Yeah. So I hope it's some other men out there that could do the same, somebody that you love and trust, that you can just share with what happened to you, so you can get some healing. And today on my wisdom tips for this week, I want to talk to you a little bit about overcoming childhood trauma and how you can get some help on a child's perspective as well as an adult's perspective. Number one, we need to provide assurance that everything's going to be all right, that you're there for them. You can pray with them. You can make them feel safe and make them feel like that, you know, this is not going to happen again, long as this on your watch, and make them feel secure. And I think that helps a whole lot. I always go back to the daycare that we had. That's what we had to do with kids that had a lot of discipline problems, that had childhood trauma. They love for you to touch and hug them, you know, and make them feel like that they were going to be safe. If somebody hit them or anything, you know, one of the kids, you know, kids hit each other, they would run to the teacher and cry instead of, you know, fussing at the other child. We would just tell him, you know, just go over there and talk to Johnny and tell him not to hit you again, to try to give them some sense of how to take up for themselves by talking in a nice way. And now a lot of times that would help, and then they would feel safe. And the kids usually end up hugging each other, and the rest was history. Number 2, take away the blame game. Explain that he or she is not responsible. A lot of times the victims feel like they are responsible. And so I had to share with my son as well. He wasn't responsible for that. We the one chose those babysitters. He said he was afraid because we knew them and we were real close to these individuals. And he said he didn't know how to tell us. And so we reassured him that it wasn't his fault. You know, it really wasn't nobody's fault, but I was the one as a parent. We took responsibility, me and his father, because we were the one that allowed those people to take care of him and my other son. And so, you know, like I said, I felt guilty and all that, but life happens, but I thank God we got through it. Number 3, be patient. Be patient is the key. Some children will recover quickly, and some adults will recover quickly, while others will recover slowly. Now, if some people still crying about something that happened to them 40 years ago, that, you know, because they're different from everybody else, and maybe they didn't know how to process it. They didn't have nobody to love them, to reassure them. Maybe somebody blamed them. You know, so you got to remember, you got to be patient, because people that go through childhood trauma, is something that happened years ago. Even it's hard sometimes to break through that barrier. So you have to be patient. You know, reassure them that they do not need to feel guilty, and they don't need to feel bad. Let me say it again. They don't need to feel guilty, or they don't need to feel bad. We have all come through the short. What does the Bible say? We have all fallen short of the glory of God. We all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So we need to stop being so quick with judging people, because you don't really know what their true story is. All right. So, and don't make them feel bad. And this even comes with the kids. When things happen to them, they feel, well, maybe mom, it was my fault. You know, I hugged them and then this happened to me. No, it's not their fault. You got to reassure them it's not their fault. And my last wisdom tips is seek help. Seek help. Seek help from a counselor. Seek help from a mental health professional. Seek treatment from a pastor, a clergy member, or somebody, a life coach, somebody you trust, your mom, your dad, family member. Seek help immediately. Let somebody know what happened to you. And if you're a child and you're on here today, or you're a teen, let somebody know. A school counselor, a family physician, a pediatrician. You know, ask somebody to help you, and somebody I'm sure will be out there to help you. And then we have all kind of referrals that you can go to and you can call. One of the numbers you can call is 1-800-662-HELP. 1-800-662-HELP. So before you go and just, you know, leave the broadcast, I want you to have these numbers. And if you're not the person that are being affected by it, and you know somebody is, please, it's Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services. It's 1-800-662-HELP. And the number is 4357. I hope you enjoyed the broadcast tonight. Again, I thank my special guest, my son, my oldest son, Roger Green Jr., not to be confused with Roger Green Sr., which is his daddy, which he often say. Well, that is going to do it for this week's episode on Wisdom Tips. Join us every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Facebook and YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because the more you subscribe to our channel, the more people we can get to be able to see this broadcast. If you don't subscribe, if you don't hit the button and come on when we're on, then we won't be able to have but just a few people in here. So we want everybody to know about Wisdom Tips, not because it's me teaching, but we're going to have some very awesome topics that's going to really help people. People just going to be able to get healed, delivered, and set free. So remember, we ain't got no time for tears and fears. Wisdom tips is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom and all that getting understanding, so you can live a victorious life. Have a blessed day, everyone. Love you guys. Bye-bye.